The vast emptiness of space was silent, save for the faint signal of a lone distress beacon. Captain Nelira sat in her command chair, her pale blue fingers hovering over the holographic controls. Her silver-white hair framed a face that carried the weight of countless battles. She had led her starship, Valorian, through countless skirmishes, but this moment was different. "Captain, the signal is human," her first officer reported, his tone edged with caution. Nelira narrowed her soft amber eyes. Humans were rare in this sector of space, often regarded as reckless explorers with a penchant for trouble. Yet there was something compelling about their spirit. She leaned forward. "Is the ship intact?" she asked. "Barely," the officer replied. "Life support systems are failing. We estimate the occupant has less than 10 minutes. Prepare a rescue team," Nelira commanded. Her crew exchanged wary glances. Intervening in human affairs was not their responsibility. Risking their lives for one survivor seemed foolish, but none dared question her. Captain Nelira was known for her decisive leadership and her compassion, even if it defied protocol. The rescue pod launched swiftly, piercing through the debris field that surrounded the broken human vessel. Inside, Ethan Cole, a scout pilot for Earth's exploration fleet, clung to consciousness. Smoke filled the cockpit, and sparks danced from the shattered controls. His oxygen was almost gone. "Just hold on," Ethan muttered to himself, his voice raspy. He didn't believe anyone would come. Out here, in the cold void, survival was a cruel joke. Then he saw it, a sleek craft, its metallic hull shimmering under distant starlight. The pod latched onto his vessel with precision, and moments later, the hatch hissed open. A towering figure stepped in, her silhouette illuminated by the soft lights of her suit. Ethan blinked, his vision blurry, but he could make out her strange features. Pale blue skin, sharp yet delicate. She wasn't human. "Stay still," Nelira said in a calm, commanding voice. Her translator device rendered her words perfectly. Ethan didn't resist as she scanned him with a small device, then lifted him effortlessly from his seat. His suit had shielded him from most of the damage, but he was weak and lightheaded. As they retreated back to the Valorian, Ethan's mind flickered between relief and disbelief. The medbay was unlike anything Ethan had seen before. Soft lights pulsed rhythmically along the walls, and alien symbols hovered in the air like holographic scripts. Ethan lay on a sleek bed, tubes connected to his arms, monitoring his vitals. His head throbbed, but his breathing was steady now. Nelira stood at a distance, observing him. Her crew had performed admirably during the rescue, but now they questioned her decision. "Captain," her first officer began hesitantly, "humans are unpredictable. We don't know his intentions. Saving him may bring complications." Nelira silenced him with a raised hand. "He was dying. I would not abandon anyone to the void." Her tone left no room for argument, though her heart was conflicted. She knew the risks. Humans were known for their resilience, but also their propensity for chaos. Yet, looking at the fragile figure lying on the medbay bed, she saw more than a risk. She saw potential. Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He squinted at the unfamiliar surroundings, panic creeping in. Then he saw her, the woman who had saved him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held a strange warmth. Where am I?" he croaked. "You're aboard the Valorian," Nelira replied. "You were moments away from death. My crew and I saved you." Ethan tried to sit up but winced in pain. "Why? You didn't have to." Nelira tilted her head slightly. "Perhaps not. But you are alive, and that is what matters." For the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. He didn't know what fate had in store for him aboard this alien vessel, but one thing was clear. His life now belonged to the mysterious captain who had defied the odds to save him. Ethan's eyes scanned the medbay again, his breath steady but shallow. He couldn't ignore the strange hum of the machines around him, or the soft, rhythmic pulses of light that lined the walls. Every detail reminded him he was far from Earth. His gaze landed on the pale blue woman standing nearby. Her presence was commanding, yet oddly comforting. "You're the one who saved me," Ethan said, his voice raspy. "I am Captain Nolira," she replied. Her tone was calm, but her golden eyes were sharp, observing every movement he made. "You're fortunate we found you in time. Your ship was minutes from complete collapse." Ethan tried to sit up but felt a sharp pain in his ribs. He winced and fell back onto the soft surface of the medbay bed. Yeah, that ship didn't exactly come with a survival manual for situations like this. Nolira didn't laugh, but the corner of her lips curved slightly. It was the closest thing to a smile Ethan had seen from her. Over the next few hours, Ethan was examined by the ship's medics. Though they were reluctant to handle a human, they followed Nolira's orders without question. Their advanced medical technology worked wonders, sealing his wounds and stabilizing his condition far quicker than Earth's medics ever could. Ethan marveled at the efficiency of their tools, even in his groggy state. Meanwhile, Nolira returned to her quarters, where her first officer, Lyrek, awaited her. He stood stiffly, his face lined with disapproval. "Captain," with respect, "why are we taking such a risk for this human?" Lyrek asked. "Our resources are already stretched thin. He could be a liability." Nolira turned to him, her expression firm. "Lyrek, I've read about humans. They are resourceful and surprisingly resilient. He may prove more valuable than you think." Lyrek hesitated but nodded. "And if he doesn't? Then we'll cross that bridge when we reach it," she said simply, dismissing him. Ethan's curiosity only grew as he regained his strength. When Nolira returned to check on him later, he peppered her with questions. "Why did you save me?" he asked. "Not that I'm complaining, but humans and your kind aren't exactly best friends, are we?" Nolira tilted her head slightly, considering her answer. "We don't see many humans in this part of space, but no one deserves to die alone in the void. I couldn't leave you there." Ethan frowned, not entirely convinced. "That's a lot of trouble to go through for a stranger." "I don't expect you to understand," Nolira said, "but my decisions are mine alone. You're alive because I chose it." For a moment, neither spoke. Ethan could feel the weight of her words, but there was something unspoken in her tone, something he couldn't quite grasp. Days passed, and Ethan began to recover. The crew remained wary of him, often keeping their distance, but he noticed the quiet efficiency with which they worked. They were disciplined, loyal, and clearly respected their captain. Nolira visited him daily, sometimes to check his progress, other times out of curiosity. Their conversations grew longer and more personal. Ethan told her about Earth, its chaos, its beauty, and its struggles. She listened intently, her amber eyes never leaving his face. "What drives your people to explore so far from your home?" she asked one day. Ethan chuckled weakly. "Curiosity, mostly. Sometimes greed. But for me, it's the hope of finding something greater than myself." Her gaze softened at his words, though she didn't reply. For a fleeting moment, she felt she understood this fragile, determined human more than she expected. One evening, as Nolira prepared to leave the medbay, Ethan called out to her. "Thank you, Captain," he said, "for saving me, for everything." She paused, looking back at him. For the first time, her voice held a trace of warmth. "Rest well, Ethan Cole. You'll need your strength." As the door slid shut behind her, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what fate had in store for him aboard this alien vessel. One thing was certain, his journey had only just begun. Ethan had always considered himself adaptable, but life aboard Captain Nolira's ship was testing his limits. The alien technology, the language barriers, and the wary gazes of her crew made him feel like an outsider. Still, his curiosity pushed him forward. Every corner of the ship seemed alive, humming with energy and purpose. The more he saw, the more he realized how advanced her people were compared to humans. Nolira visited him regularly, often during quiet moments when the rest of the crew was occupied. It became a routine. A shared meal, a few questions, and stories about their vastly different worlds. Ethan found himself looking forward to these moments, not just for the companionship, but for the glimpses of vulnerability behind her commanding presence. One day, as they sat in a small observation room overlooking a sea of stars, Ethan leaned back in his chair and asked the question that had been on his mind for days. "You don't strike me as the kind of person who follows rules blindly," he said. "Why did you become a captain?" Nellira's gaze remained fixed on the stars for a moment before she spoke. "It wasn't a choice I made lightly," she began. "In my society, lineage and tradition dictate much of our lives. My family expected me to follow their path. Diplomacy, politics, a life of calculated alliances. But I wanted something different." "What did you want?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. "To explore," she said simply. "To command a ship, to see the stars not as boundaries but as opportunities. It wasn't easy. I had to prove myself again and again, often to those who believed I didn't belong." Ethan nodded, understanding more than she realized. "Sounds familiar. Earth's not so different. People love putting others in boxes, telling them where they should fit." Nellira turned to him, her golden eyes studying his face. "And what about you, Ethan? Did you fit in your box?" He hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "Not really," he admitted. "I joined the exploration fleet because I wanted to get away from all that. The expectations, the limits. I thought out here, in the unknown, I'd finally figure out where I belonged." "And did you?" she asked. He smirked. "Not yet, but I think I'm getting closer." Their conversations grew deeper as the days passed. Ethan learned more about Nellira's people, their rigid traditions, their advanced technology, and their struggles to balance individuality with collective responsibility. In turn, he shared stories of Earth, its chaotic beauty, and the resilience of its people. One evening, as they walked through the ship's corridors, Ethan noticed a mural etched into the wall. It depicted a starship surrounded by swirling patterns of light, with a figure standing at its helm. "That's you, isn't it?" Ethan said, pointing at the figure. Nellira nodded. "It was a gift from my crew after our first mission. They said it symbolized leadership and hope." Ethan studied the mural, impressed. "Looks like they respect you a lot." "They do," she said softly. "But respect isn't the same as trust. There are those who still doubt me, who believe I should have followed the path laid out for me." Ethan looked at her, sensing the weight of her words. "You proved them wrong, though. You're here, leading this ship, saving stranded humans like me." A faint smile touched her lips. "Perhaps, but doubt, once sown, is difficult to uproot." As they reached the medbay, Nellira paused. "Ethan," she said, her tone serious, "there's something you should know. We've received reports of a hostile fleet in the sector. They may cross our path soon." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Hostile? You mean they'll attack?" "Possibly," Nellira said. "I won't let anything happen to my crew or this ship, but it may be safer for you if we can find a place to leave you before the situation escalates." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not leaving, Captain. You saved me. The least I can do is stay and help." Her eyes searched his face, as if weighing his resolve. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. But understand, Ethan, this ship isn't just my responsibility. It's my home, and I will protect it at all costs." As she walked away, Ethan felt a mix of admiration and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them, not just for his own survival, but for the captain who had risked everything to save him. The atmosphere aboard the Valorian had shifted. The usual calm efficiency of the crew was now tinged with unease. News of the hostile fleet spread quickly, and whispers of doubt and fear echoed through the halls. Captain Nellira remained composed, but Ethan could see the tension behind her golden eyes. Ethan spent most of his time observing the crew. Though they were alien to him, their behavior was familiar, tight-knit, loyal, but uncertain in the face of looming danger. He wanted to help, but his presence already made many of them uneasy. They were polite but distant, their suspicion of the human outsider barely hidden. One evening, as Ethan was tinkering with a diagnostic device in the medbay, Nalira entered. She looked tired, her usually sharp features softened by exhaustion. "How's the ship holding up?" Ethan asked, putting the device down. "Stronger than it looks," Nalira replied. "But we're outmatched. The fleet pursuing us belongs to the Renthar Empire. They don't take prisoners." Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. "What do they want with you?" "We intercepted one of their convoys carrying forbidden weapons," she explained. "When we exposed their plans to the Galactic Council, they declared us traitors. Since then, they've hunted us across the stars." Ethan nodded slowly. "And now they've found you again." Nalira's gaze was steady, but her voice carried a weight of responsibility. "Yes, I've kept this ship and crew safe for years, but this time, the odds are not in our favor." Ethan could see she was preparing herself for the worst, but he wasn't ready to give up. "What if you had a different perspective? Sometimes, when you've been running too long, you stop seeing other ways out." Her brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting?" "Let me take a look at your tactical systems," Ethan said. "Humans are good at thinking outside the box. Maybe there's something you missed." Nalira hesitated, clearly torn between her instincts and her trust in Ethan. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. But remember, lives are at stake." Over the next few hours, Ethan immersed himself in the Valorian's tactical systems. The ship's technology was far beyond anything he'd encountered, but its core principles weren't too different from Earth's systems. He analyzed their sensor data, studied the Renthar fleet's movements, and reviewed the Valorian's capabilities. The more he learned, the more an idea began to form. When he presented his findings to Nalira and her senior officers, they listened with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "You want to lure them into an asteroid field?" Lyric, Nalira's first officer, asked, his tone dubious. "Yes," Ethan said. "Your ship's maneuverability is better than theirs. If we bait them into the field, they'll lose their advantage. Plus, the asteroid's mineral composition can interfere with their targeting systems." Another officer scoffed. "It's risky. If we're caught in their crossfire, we're done for." "It's a risk," Ethan admitted, "but better than being cornered in open space. Right now, running isn't working." Nalira studied the holographic display, her mind weighing the options. Finally, she turned to her crew. "Prepare the ship. We'll execute the plan." The officers exchanged uneasy glances but saluted. Ethan could feel the weight of their doubt, but Nalira's trust in him gave him hope. As the crew prepared for the maneuver, Nalira found Ethan alone in the observation room. He was staring out at the stars, his expression pensive. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "No," Ethan replied honestly. "But sometimes, the best plan is the one no one expects." Nalira stepped closer, her voice soft. "I see now why your people are so unpredictable. You take chances others wouldn't even consider." Ethan smiled faintly. "It's a human thing." She gave a small nod, her respect for him growing. "Let's hope your human instincts are as reliable as you believe." As the Valorian approached the asteroid field, tension filled the air. The hostile fleet loomed behind them, their massive ships a stark contrast to the sleek design of Nalira's vessel. Ethan stood on the bridge beside her, his heart pounding as the plan unfolded. "Entering the field in 10 seconds, Lyric announced. Nalira's voice cut through the tension. "Steady. Follow my commands precisely." The ship weaved through the dense field, asteroids tumbling past them like ancient guardians of the void. The Renthar fleet hesitated, their massive ships struggling to navigate the tight spaces. Just as Ethan had predicted, their targeting systems faltered and chaos erupted among their ranks. Nalira's crew capitalized on the confusion, launching precise strikes that crippled several enemy ships. Ethan watched in awe as Nalira commanded her crew with precision and confidence. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. The asteroid field had become a temporary sanctuary for the Valorian, After narrowly escaping the Renthar fleet, the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage to the ship. The atmosphere aboard had shifted again, this time with a faint sense of hope. Ethan's plan had not only saved them, but also earned him the crew's begrudging respect. Ethan, however, didn't feel like a hero. He knew the Renthar wouldn't give up so easily. They would regroup and come back stronger. As he walked through the dimly lit corridors of the ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that the calm wouldn't last. Ethan found Captain Nalira in the observation room, where she often went when she needed to think. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her tall figure silhouetted against the swirling asteroid field outside. "You don't sleep much, do you?" Ethan said, leaning casually against the doorframe. Nalira glanced at him, her expression unreadable. A captain's responsibilities don't end when the crew sleeps. Ethan stepped closer, his gaze following hers to the endless expanse of stars. "You're worried they'll come back." "They will," she said without hesitation. "The Renthar are relentless. We've bought ourselves time, but not safety." Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You've been running from them for a long time, haven't you?" "Years," she admitted. "Every decision I make, every battle we fight, is to keep my crew alive. But even the strongest ship has its limits." Ethan studied her face, noting the faint lines of exhaustion. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. You've got a crew that believes in you. And now you've got me." A faint smile tugged at the corner of Nalira's lips. "You're surprisingly optimistic for someone who was stranded in space days ago." "Humans are stubborn like that," Ethan replied with a grin. "We like to find hope in the worst situations." Over the next few days, Ethan worked alongside the crew, helping wherever he could. Though he lacked their advanced knowledge, his ingenuity and willingness to learn quickly won over even the most skeptical members. He repaired minor systems, assisted in tactical planning, and even shared meals with them, bridging the gap between their vastly different worlds. For Nalira, watching Ethan integrate into her crew was unexpected. She had seen humans as unpredictable and chaotic, but Ethan had shown her something different: resilience and a knack for bringing people together. It was a quality she admired, even if she didn't say it aloud. One evening, Ethan and Nalira found themselves alone in the ship's galley. He had insisted on cooking something Earth-style, much to the amusement of the crew. The result was a simple stew, and while the alien ingredients didn't taste quite like what he was used to, it was enough to remind him of home. "You're full of surprises," Nalira remarked as she sampled the dish. "I didn't expect you to be a cook." Ethan chuckled. "Back on Earth, I used to think cooking was just a survival skill. Out here, it feels like a way to connect." Nalira nodded thoughtfully. "Connection is rare in the void. Perhaps that's why your presence here feels different." Ethan met her gaze, surprised by the admission. Different good or different bad? She didn't answer immediately, her golden eyes searching his face. "Different good," she said finally. The moment of peace was interrupted by an alert. The ship's comm system crackled to life, and Lyric's voice echoed through the room. "Captain, sensors are picking up movement outside the field. It could be the Renthar." Nalira was on her feet instantly, her calm demeanor replaced by sharp focus. "I'll be there shortly," she said into the comm. Ethan stood as well, his heart racing. "Looks like the calm's over." Nalira glanced at him, her expression resolute. "Stay close, Ethan. This time, we fight back." As they hurried to the bridge, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them both. The Renthar wouldn't stop until they had destroyed the Valorian, but Ethan and Nalira weren't about to let that happen. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he had something worth fighting for, and he wasn't about to let it slip away. The bridge of the Valorian was alive with activity. Lights blinked across the control panels, and crew members moved with urgency as the Renthar fleet appeared on the sensors. Their ships were larger, more heavily armed, and rapidly closing in on the asteroid field. Captain Nalira stood in the center, her golden eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the enemy's approach. Ethan stood beside her, feeling out of place but determined to help. "They've sent more ships this time," Lyric reported grimly. "They're learning from our last encounter." "They underestimate us," Nalira said calmly. Her voice carried the steady authority that had earned her the loyalty of her crew. "We'll show them why that's a mistake." Ethan studied the hologram, his mind racing. The asteroid field had been their ally once, but now the Renthar knew its dangers. They wouldn't fall for the same tricks. "What if we use the asteroids as weapons?" Ethan suggested suddenly. Nalira turned to him, intrigued. "Explain." Ethan pointed to a cluster of dense, metallic asteroids on the display. "If we can tow some of these into their path, they'll have to either destroy them or maneuver around them. Either way, it disrupts their formation and gives us an opening to strike." Lyric frowned. "That's a high-risk strategy. If they target the towing ships." "They won't," Nalira interrupted, her gaze steady on Ethan. "They'll focus on the larger threat. It's a bold move, but it might just work." She looked at her crew. "Prepare the grappling systems. Redirect power to the engines. We move now." The Valorian dove deeper into the asteroid field, its sleek hull navigating the tight spaces with precision. Grappling arms extended from the ship, securing two massive asteroids. Other smaller vessels from the fleet did the same, creating a makeshift barricade to intercept the Renthar's advance. Ethan stood on the bridge, watching the crew work in perfect synchronization. It was a stark contrast to the chaos he was used to back on Earth. These people, no, these allies, knew the stakes, and they trusted their captain completely. As the Renthar fleet approached the barricade, their ships slowed. Just as Ethan had predicted, the massive asteroids forced them to alter their course. It was the opening the Valorian needed. "Fire on my command," Nalira ordered, her voice sharp and clear. The ship's cannons roared to life, their energy blasts slicing through the void and slamming into the Renthar's lead vessels. Explosions lit up the dark expanse as one enemy ship after another was crippled. The crew cheered, but Nalira remained focused. "They're regrouping," Lyric warned. "Their second wave is moving in." "Hold the line," Nalira commanded. "Ethan, any more ideas?" Ethan studied the display, his mind working overtime. "What about using the debris from their destroyed ships? If we detonate it in their path, it could create a chain reaction." Nalira nodded. "Do it. Redirect fire to the wreckage." The crew quickly adjusted their targeting, firing precision shots at the floating debris. Ethan's plan worked better than expected. When the wreckage exploded, it sent shrapnel flying into the advancing Renthar ships, damaging several of them. The battlefield was now a chaotic storm of fire and debris, and the Valorian danced through it like a predator in its element. But victory wasn't guaranteed. One of the Renthar's largest ships broke through the barricade, its weapons charging for a devastating strike. "They're targeting us," Lyric shouted. Nalira didn't flinch. Evasive maneuvers. Redirect all shields to the front. Ethan's heart pounded as the massive ship loomed closer. He could see the determination in Nalira's eyes, but also the weight of the risk she was taking. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting the people who depended on her. The Valorian's engines roared as it narrowly avoided the Renthar's assault. At the same time, its cannons unleashed a final concentrated blast at the enemy ship's core. The explosion that followed was blinding, shaking the Valorian to its core, but leaving the Renthar flagship in ruins. Cheers erupted across the bridge, but Nalira's voice cut through the noise. "Status report." Lyric scanned his console. "Minor damage to our lower decks, but we're still operational. The Renthar are retreating." Nalira allowed herself a rare smile. "Good. Let them run." As the adrenaline faded, Ethan slumped into a chair, exhausted but relieved. He glanced at Nalira, who stood tall and composed, despite everything they had just endured. "You're incredible, you know that," he said, half joking. Nalaira raised an eyebrow. It wasn't just me. Your ideas made the difference. Ethan smiled faintly. Guess that makes us a good team. The aftermath of the battle left the Valorian in a cautious calm. Repairs were underway, the crew worked with renewed purpose, and the once distant stares toward Ethan had turned into nods of respect. For the first time since he boarded the ship, Ethan felt like he truly belonged. Ethan found himself on the observation deck, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. His reflection on the glass showed a man change, not just by circumstance, but by the bonds he had formed with these remarkable beings. He was deep in thought when Captain Nalaira entered, her presence commanding as always, yet there was a softness in her steps that only he seemed to notice. Lost in thought? She asked, standing beside him. Ethan smiled faintly. Just trying to make sense of all this. A week ago, I was stranded, thinking I was done for. Now, I'm here, alive, fighting alongside a crew that's not even human. Nalaira's golden eyes studied him for a moment. You've adapted well. Few would thrive in your position, but you've proven yourself resourceful and unique. Ethan chuckled. Unique? That's a polite way of saying I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. Perhaps, she admitted, a rare smile tugging at her lips. But sometimes, not knowing can lead to perspectives others cannot see. You've shown that. The days following the battle were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan threw himself into helping with the repairs, learning more about the ship's systems, and earning the trust of more crewmates. One of the engineers, a stern but kind alien named Velra, even taught him how to operate some of their more advanced tools. You're not bad for a human, Velra said one day, handing Ethan a tool shaped like a crescent. You don't quit, even when things seem impossible. Ethan grinned. That's high praise coming from you. Velra smirked, a rare expression for her. Don't let it go to your head. Despite the progress, the shadow of the Renthar lingered. Everyone aboard the Valorian knew the enemy would return. And next time, they might not be so lucky. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that their temporary victory was just the beginning of a larger conflict. During a strategy meeting, Ethan sat beside Nalaira and her officers. He had been invited, not as an observer, but as an advisor. It was a position he hadn't expected but took seriously. Our next step is critical, Nalaira said, her tone firm. The Renthar won't stop. We need to find a place to regroup, somewhere safe. Ethan leaned forward, studying the holographic map of nearby systems. What about here? He asked, pointing to a cluster of uncharted regions. If it's unmarked, it might be hard for them to track us. Lyric frowned. Uncharted regions are dangerous. We don't know what's out there. Exactly, Ethan said. They won't know either. It's a gamble, but it could give us the time we need to repair and prepare. Nalaira nodded slowly. A gamble, but one worth considering. We'll set course immediately. As the Valorian ventured into the unknown, Ethan spent more time with Nalaira. Their conversations grew more personal, drifting from strategy to philosophy and even moments of levity. One evening, as they walked through the quiet corridors, Ethan turned to her. You're different from anyone I've ever met, he said. Nalaira raised an eyebrow. Because I'm not human. Ethan shook his head. Because you lead with your heart. You care about your crew, even when it's hard. That's rare. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. And you remind me of why I chose this path. To defy expectations, to protect what matters. There was a silence between them, not awkward but charged with unspoken understanding. In that moment, Ethan realized something he hadn't before. He wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. He was fighting for her, for the crew, for a cause bigger than himself. As they neared the uncharted region, the tension aboard the ship grew. But alongside it was a sense of hope. The Valorian had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger, and now, with Ethan as part of their family, they were ready to face whatever lay ahead. Standing on the bridge beside Nalaira, Ethan glanced at her, ready for the next adventure. Her lips curved into a small smile. Always. As the ship crossed into the uncharted expanse, the stars ahead seemed brighter, a promise of new challenges and new beginnings. Together, they were ready to face whatever came their way. The Valorian floated silently in the uncharted expanse, surrounded by an endless sea of stars and distant, unfamiliar worlds. The crew worked tirelessly to ensure the ship was ready for whatever lay ahead. The uncharted region was a mystery, full of potential dangers and opportunities. For Ethan, it felt like stepping into a new chapter of his life. Ethan spent his time helping where he could, but his thoughts often wandered. He had been aboard the ship long enough to feel like part of the crew, yet a small voice in his head reminded him that Earth was still out there, waiting for him. It wasn't a decision he had thought much about, until now. Captain Nelira called Ethan to the observation deck late one evening. The room was dimly lit, the stars outside casting a soft glow on her pale blue skin. She was standing with her hands clasped behind her back, staring into the void. "You wanted to see me?" Ethan asked, his voice breaking the quiet. Nelira turned to face him. Her expression was calm, but there was a seriousness in her golden eyes. "Yes, I've been thinking about what comes next." Ethan tilted his head. "For the ship, or for me?" "For both," she replied. She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You've become an important part of this crew, Ethan. Your ideas, your perspective, they've saved us more than once. But I know this isn't your home." Ethan nodded slowly, sensing the weight of her words. "I've been thinking about that too. I miss Earth, sure, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Not the way this ship does." Nelira studied him for a moment before speaking again. "The uncharted region is dangerous. I can't promise your safety if you stay with us. But if you choose to leave, I will find a way to return you to your people." Ethan hesitated. He had been waiting for this conversation, but now that it was here, the choice felt heavier than he expected. The next day, Ethan walked through the ship, reflecting on everything he had experienced. The crew greeted him with nods and smiles, something that had taken time to earn. Velra waved him over to help with a repair, while Lerek gave him a rare word of encouragement about his contributions. These people, aliens, technically, had become his family. And Nelira, she was more than just a leader to him. She was a constant presence, someone who inspired him to be better, to fight harder. That evening, Ethan found himself back in the observation deck. Nelira was there, as if she had been waiting for him. "I've made my decision," he said, his voice steady. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "And I'm staying," Ethan said firmly. "Earth might be where I came from, but this is where I belong now. With you, with this crew." For a moment, Nelira didn't respond. Then, a small, genuine smile appeared on her lips. "You're certain? There's no turning back?" Ethan nodded. "I've never been more certain." Nelira's gaze softened, and she extended her hand. "Then welcome to the Valorian, officially." Ethan shook her hand, feeling a sense of finality and new beginnings all at once. "Thank you, Captain." The days that followed were filled with preparation. The ship ventured deeper into the uncharted region, navigating strange phenomena and encountering wonders they had never imagined. Ethan found himself growing more confident in his role, working closely with Nelira and the crew to ensure their survival. One evening, as they stood on the bridge, Nelira turned to Ethan. "You've changed since the day we rescued you." "So have you," Ethan replied with a grin. She tilted her head slightly. "Perhaps, but one thing hasn't changed, my responsibility to this crew, including you." Ethan nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "And I'll do everything I can to make sure we succeed, together." As the Valorian pressed on, the uncharted region stretched before them like a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with their story. For Ethan and Nelira, it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about carving out a future worth fighting for. The Valorian sailed deeper into the uncharted region. the vastness of space stretching endlessly before them. Strange celestial phenomena lit up the dark void, casting shimmering patterns across the ship's hull. Despite the beauty of their surroundings, the crew remained vigilant. This was no place for complacency. Ethan stood on the bridge beside Captain Nalira, their bond stronger than ever. He had chosen this life, not just for survival, but because he believed in the people aboard this ship, and most of all, in her. "What do you think is out there?" Ethan asked, his gaze fixed on the swirling nebula ahead. Nalira's lips curved into a faint smile. "Possibility, danger, perhaps even answers." Ethan chuckled. Spoken like a true captain. She turned to him, her golden eyes softer than usual. "And you've become more than just a passenger, Ethan. You're part of this crew now, part of this journey." Their newfound camaraderie was tested sooner than they expected. As the Valorian approached a dense asteroid belt, sensors picked up an unknown signal. It was faint but persistent, as if calling out for help. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their instincts warning them of a potential trap. Nalira made her decision quickly. "Prepare to investigate. Stay alert." Ethan leaned toward her. "You think it's another Renthar trick?" "Possibly," she admitted. "But we don't ignore distress signals, no matter the risk." Ethan admired her unwavering resolve. It was one of the reasons he had chosen to stay. She didn't just command respect. She earned it. As the ship neared the source of the signal, the crew discovered a derelict vessel drifting among the asteroids. Its design was unfamiliar, ancient yet advanced. The hull was scared from what looked like a fierce battle, and no signs of life could be detected. "Send a team to investigate," Nalira ordered. Ethan volunteered immediately, joining a small group of crew members. They suited up and boarded the vessel, their steps echoing in the eerie silence of the abandoned ship. The air was thick with the weight of its history, every corner hinting at stories long forgotten. "What happened here?" Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible through the comms. Velra, scanning the surroundings with her device, shook her head. Whatever it wasn't quick. They reached the control room, where a single console flickered weakly. Ethan approached it, his curiosity driving him forward. With Velra's help, they activated the console and uncovered fragments of a distress message. The voice that played was garbled but hauntingly clear in its plea. "To anyone who hears this, beware, they are coming." Back on the Valorian, Nalira listened intently as Ethan and the team recounted their findings. The warning unsettled the crew. Who were they, and were they still a threat? "This region is full of unknowns," Nalira said, her voice steady. "But we will face whatever comes together." Her words brought a sense of calm to the crew, but Ethan could see the flicker of concern in her eyes. Later that night, as they stood alone on the observation deck, he spoke the question that had been gnawing at him. "Do you think we'll ever find a place where we're safe?" Nalira's gaze remained fixed on the stars. "Safety is not a destination, Ethan. It's a state of being. As long as we stand together, we'll face anything that comes our way." He smiled. "I like the sound of that." The next day, the Valorian resumed its journey, its crew more determined than ever. Ethan had fully embraced his role aboard the ship, working side by side with Nalira and the others to prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. As they navigated through the nebula, a strange calm settled over the ship. Ethan found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed since the day Nalira had saved him. He had started as a stranded survivor, but now he was part of something far greater. A crew, a family, a purpose. Nalira stood beside him, her presence a constant source of strength. "You've come a long way," she said softly. "So have you," Ethan replied, "and I'm not going anywhere." She turned to him, a rare smile gracing her lips. "Good, because we're just getting started." Together, they watched as the Valorian sailed into the unknown, its path illuminated by the distant light of stars. For Ethan and Nalira, this was more than just a journey. It was the beginning of a future they would face together, no matter what awaited them.